I will now pre-trip a school bus on the driver's side underneath the hood. Depending on what model or brand you deal with, the layout might be a little bit different, but the components are always the same. In this case, we are dealing with a 2019 conventional style school bus, Bluebird. We'll start with the wire harness. The wire harness is securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not worn, torn, cut, or frayed, and there is no spliced wire. Then I look at my fluids. There is the engine oil over here. It is checked with a dipstick when the engine is not running. And the way you go about it, you take the dipstick off, you wipe it off, you put it back in, then you take it back out again, and you check for adequate reading, and you put it back in. It is securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged, and it is not leaking. Over here, there is the power steering fluid. It doesn't deal with a dipstick, it deals with an eyesight glass. So all you have to do is to check for adequate level when the engine is not running. And it is securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, broken, dirty, or missing, and it is not leaking. Now I look at my air compressor. The air compressor is securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. It is not leaking. It's important to mention when you deal with air or fluids that it is not leaking. And also it is important to mention whether it is belt or gear driven. In this case, it is belt driven, and the belt is securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts. It's not worn, torn, cut, or frayed, and it has a play of no more than 3/4 of an inch. Over here, there is the alternator. The alternator is securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. There is no loose, frayed, or hanging wire. And it is not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. And it is belt driven. Over here, there is the water pump. The water pump is securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. It is not leaking, and it is belt driven. See both the alternator and the water pump are run by a serpentine belt. The serpentine belt is right over here, and the serpentine belt is not worn, torn, cut, or frayed. It's securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, and there is a play of no more than 3/4 of an inch. Now that I am done talking about these components, what I do, I go system by system to avoid going back and forth from one system to the other and be confused and, skip components. So what I'll do, I'll talk about the steering system, which is over here, starting with the steering rod. The steering rod here is straight line, securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. Those over here are the U-joints. There's one here, there's one there. The U-joints are securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged, and properly greased. There is the steering gearbox over here. The steering gearbox is securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. Over here, there is the pitman arm. The pitman arm is securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. Over here, there is the dragging linkage. Straight line, securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. Over here, there is the steering knuckle. The steering knuckle looks like your knuckles, just like this. Securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. And there's a steering arm a little bit further. Steering arm is securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. And over here, those are the cutter keys or cutter pins. This one there, here, and this one over there. Those are the cutter pins or cutter keys. Securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. And if you look a bit further, there is the tie rod. It's hard to see, but there is the tie rod end. Securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts. Oh, right there. Securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. The tie rod end. Then, when I'm done with the steering system, I move on to the suspension system. Starting with the spring mount over here. There's one spring mount. There's more than one. This one is easy to see. If you go further back, there's another spring mount, and near the back wheel, they're there over, also. But right now we're concerned with underneath the hood. So the spring mount, securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. This over here, that's a leaf spring. The leaf spring is securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged, and not shifted. The examiner will look specifically for this word, not shifted. Over here, this is the shock absorber. It's shaped like a cylinder. Shock absorber. Securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged, and not compressed. Over here, those are the U-bolts. This over here and this over there, those are the U-bolts. Securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged, and they secure the suspension system to the front axle. And the difference, you don't need to tell the examiner that much, but by the way, the difference between a U-bolt and a U-joint is that the U-joint is more like your knees or elbow. It's an articulation. Whereas the U-bolt is not the universal bolt, it's just like a clip to hold two parts together. Universal joint needs to be properly greased. U-bolt, not necessarily, as long as it's securely mounted. Then what you do at this point, you move to the air brake system, starting with my air chamber over here. My air chamber is securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged, and not leaking. And over here, that's the hose for my air chamber. It is securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not worn, torn, cut, or frayed, not leaking, no soft bulging spot outside that could indicate possible damage inside, and the clamps are into place. And then over here, if I look near my air chamber, there is the slack adjuster push rod. This is it over here. The slack adjuster push rod, securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. It is checked when the vehicle is parked at ground level, the wheel is chucked, and the parking brake is released. And when it is checked, there should be no more than 1 inch of play, pushing, or pulling. Then I go to what is also part of the air brake system is what's in my inner wheel over here. So the inner rim, securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged, no illegal welding, no rust. Then I move on to the drum, the brake drum. It's really hard to see it, but it's in that same area. So the brake drum is securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented or damaged. And then we move on to the brake linings, pads and shoes, securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts, not cracked, bent, dented, or damaged. The pads and shoes are not dangerously thin, and they are not covered with dust, grease, or other fluids such as engine oil. So this pretty much completes the underneath the hood pre-trip on the driver's side for this vehicle.